Was sitting down to watch it last night with that nagging question, what is the BBL final? What is the decider? And by the end of it, you just had a pulsating environment that meant so much to a city and to a state, and you had a headline act in Mitch Owen. So let's tap into the wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock this Tuesday. Hello to you, Crash.
G'day, Gerard. Oh, it's good to be back, mate. And I agree with what you just said. There's sometimes we have our first catch-up of the year and we say, well, it's been a tardy year for cricket, but this has been a gold star. The Indian series and probably the best Big Bash in about 7 years, I reckon. It was tight games, good quality cricket, a lot of controversy, big headlines, and to finish on an absolute tub-thumping note last night with Mitch Owen, it was wonderful.
How good a performance was that? 11 sixes, record equalling century in the final, no less. The kid who used to go to the stadium and watch that team play with the dream. It was boys' own stuff.
To think that he's got his photo up in the hallway of that stadium with his arms in the air and his mouth open, cheering on the hill, like as one of the little background photos. It's quite beautiful. And do you know what's something, Gerard? I reckon it means so much more if you can get a local star doing that. Like, I know if Chris Gale passes through the system and AB de Villiers and these guys, but if you can get a Travis Head in Adelaide, if you can get a Sam Constas in Sydney, or a Mitch Owen in Hobart. Like, he'll probably live there forever. He's from a place called Kingston, just south of Hobart. He's a real Tasmanian. And I just think you get such a dividend out of them. Like, Ian Healy was a cult hero in Brisbane when he played. And for the last 30 years, Heels has probably done, 600 charity gigs.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where he's still a cult hero. So that's what I hope Mitch Owen will bring to them. But what a story. It's very similar to Bo Webster. He's a big guy like Bo. He's from south of Hobart like Bo. He bowls off spin and medium pace like Bo and has been on this sort of journey of discovery for himself.
So the Jack Jumpers did it in the NBL and now in the BBL. They've done it. Crash, it's a good time to be winning titles given that the AFL team is on the runway.
Well, see, this is, I think, and you mentioned it earlier, no, Brett Jeeves did. I spoke to a guy from the Hobart Hurricanes about 3 or 4 months ago, and he said, look, we're a little bit worried commercially in that the Jack Jumpers are just the flavour of the month. And with the Devils coming in, they said there is a squeeze on them. We're a small market, and we really need things to move for us in the BBL. So that's why this was just, it could not have been more timely. And do you know what, Gerard? It wasn't just this title win, it was the way they played. I felt they were the most entertaining team throughout the whole competition, with Mitch Owen a strike rate of, wait for it, 203 for the competition. That's 2 runs a ball.
Yeah.
Like he was the leading run scorer at 2 runs a ball, and then further down the order you had Matt Wade and David, and then when you saw the new ball you had Riley Meredith bowling at 150 kilometres an hour. So you had the complete entertainment package, and they're a good name. The Hurricanes are good colours. So they had a meeting, the senior players, before the start of this season, saying we're better than what we've been showing. We've got to get going and. But as you say, to produce this, and Mark Waugh is a hard marker and a true marker, and he puts no mayonnaise on anything he says. But he said, I think that's one of the great Big Bash innings, perhaps the best we've seen. And that's from a guy who was a white ball national selector who watched the Big Bash feverishly for summer after summer looking for talent. And he reckons he's seen nothing better than Mitch Owen's century off 39 balls last night. That said it all.
It's a startup competition. That's its 14th grand final. It has to build its own set of incidents and lasting moments. I felt like when I sat down to watch it last night, I go, so how much does this mean? How much does the result resonate? Does it really matter who wins? It certainly mattered to the town. Would we get something that lasted? It felt to me like probably the default moment for a BBL grand final had been when the Stars capitulated against the Renegades from a position you could barely believe you could lose from. Just feels like that might last from last night, that each year when we come back to this final and they build their catalogue of previous events, that's one that we're going to remember.
Yeah, well, it was their first, and of course, it leaves the poor old Stars as the only team that hasn't won one. But I always feel, Gerard, the impact is greater if it's a one-team town. If it goes to, Perth luxuriated in the Scorchers' success, didn't they? Brisbane loved the Heat success. But when it's the Sydney Sixers, well, it means it's not the Thunder and vice versa. But Hobart, they haven't won many titles in any sport. They're a smaller state. And that's why it lingers. That's why it lasts. And that's why I think there's a slightly cult hero element to Owen, which will just embed him into Tasmanian sporting folklore. And that's what you want, because let's be candid about it. A lot of T20 and T10 cricket it's today's story and tomorrow's forgotten story. Whereas this one, I agree, it'll last and it'll linger. It builds up fibre in the competition. And I was pleased for the Big Bash this year because they shortened it. It looked good. It was punchy. The final series was crunched together, and the television ratings were up. Crowds were at their best for 7 years, and that says everything. And so I just think we've criticised the Big Bash, Gerard, when we felt it hasn't been ticking along, and I reckon it was fair criticism too. This was a very good year.
This is the right footprint for it, absolutely. So it goes through very distinct phases. It progressively gains momentum under the shadow of an excellent test series. It's relied upon more when you've got a soft test summer. It gets the boost briefly of Australian players, and gee, we saw that with that Steve Smith century was just sublime at the SCG. That's a player classes above. It comes in behind the tennis. There's no doubt it plays second fiddle to the tennis, and the television numbers will say that. It loses too many stars right at the end. And if you're following this, just the stars, for instance, is the fact that Pete Hanscom had to come in for their final and bat at 3 when he hadn't been part of the BBL because players had left. And then it needs a big finish, and it got a big finish. So is this it's had 2 good comps in a row now. Is this the re-establishment of the BBL as an excellent summer product?
Yeah, I think people have got used to the fact that it's a summer of change. It's not like a test team. Players go in and out, up and down, and it's very much you watch. It's a bit like watching a sitcom. You just watch what's in front of you. And if that means a patched-up team, I mean, no team was more patched up than the Thunder, having to call Dan Christian out of retirement. Warner did a very good job, Gerard. He really did. I felt that, he's a skillful captain. And Chris Rogers often said that he was the smartest guy he ever bat with. That doesn't mean he topped the chemistry exam at school, but it meant that he had eyes everywhere. It's from growing up virtually in the Western Sydney, where you had to have your eyes about you and your wits about you. So he's just like that on a cricket field. He did a very good job, and I felt he's the other night the peak of his captaincy was he said to Tanveer Sangha, when Maxwell came to the crease, and Sangha I think wanted to get him off strike, and he said no. I'm keeping the field in. I'm attacking. He will attack you, and he will get out. Boom, and it happened.
Yes,
that's good captaincy. That's Ian Chappell style captaincy. Had they won last night, I was going to come on your show and say that Warner has achieved something that he always wanted to in cricket, and it never quite did it, and that feel a bit of love his way.
Yeah,
we all respect him as a batsman. He's polarising. But in Western Sydney, if he'd have got them home, he would have really felt that love and affection, which I feel secretly he's been craving for his entire career and hasn't really found it outside India, actually, certainly in Australia, and that was there. And look, he got a measure of it. He did a great job leading to the final. But if he had have won that final last night, that he would have got that elusive quality, public love, which some people just can never quite grab. He would have got. So and that's a good story, and that's why sprinkling it with stars, it needs them. It needed Smith. It needed Warner.
It did. So that's the BBL. Just before we charge ahead with our chat about Sri Lanka, maybe just a few moments to reflect on the Test series against India. I was thinking about this a lot, just making my list of summer snapshots. Is that final day at the MCG was the best day of sport in Australia in 2024. It comes after we've made all our lists, and our lists have obviously been dominated by what happened in Paris. But on Australian soil, just the the day itself, from 7 in the morning when it became apparent that there was this huge social movement that 75,000 people were going to be there, to the last 90 minutes and one of the best final session victories we've ever seen by an Australian side, and the ramifications of all of that. So it had its climactic moment in what was an absolutely captivating Test summer.
Oh, yeah, it was. And you know what? The measure of what Australia achieved on that day, Gerard, is underscored by me by a simple sight. And you know what it was? At tea, I popped downstairs and there was people leaving the ground because Australia still needed 7 wickets. And some people thought that's it, India will just hang on. And then Rishabh Pant come out and played a reckless shot. 7 wickets fell, and it was madness. It was wonderful. Look, I'm sure you would have had this yourself, Gerard, since the series finished. You go out the street, people said, do you know what? I don't watch a lot of cricket, but I tell you what, I was transfixed by that. How many people have said that to you in the last fortnight? 50?
Stacks.
And I was so pleased overnight to see Jasprit Bumrah get the ICC Cricket of the Year after averaging 14 runs per wicket. And I still say that he eventually will be regarded as the greatest fast bowler in the history of the game, because and the key point to it, Gerard, is simply this: he does not have to improve. He's averaging 19 runs per wicket. He only has to hold that average. So I'm not saying, with natural improvement he's going to do this. No. He is that player now. He is a standard no one else has reached in the game. If he stays that way, and why wouldn't he? He's in his prime. I think when in 10 years' time we will say Bumrah, I've always felt that if everyone's opinion was fed into a computer with every statistic and every relevant point, the name it would spit out would be Malcolm Marshall from the West Indies. But I reckon Bumrah may have him covered by the end of his career. And that's a big statement, but I really feel this guy was so obscenely good. As much as Australia deserved their 3-1 victory, I have to say this: had Bumrah's partner Mohammad Shami come to Australia, India would have won that series.
Right. Yeah, if he'd had support at the other end.
Oh, yeah, he just like that. I mean, it was the greatest one-man show you've ever seen in your life. To keep them in contention for that series until the last day of it, when he they worked on pushing him beyond breaking point, and they got there, Australia. They said, look, we can't stand firm against this guy. We've just got to sort of resist him. We can't score runs off him. One Australian batsman said to me throughout the series, Gerard, he said, can you go work out if we've scored any runs off Bumrah, off the cut shot? So I went and worked it, and I got this quick viz onto it. They said, no, they have. And this was after the 4th test. And they said 4 runs off the cut, including 3 from Nathan Lyon and 1 from Travis Head. And when I went back to the batsman, he said, yeah, I thought that. He said, I just can't do anything with this bloke. I just got to sit on him. He's impossible. And so is the majesty of Jasprit Bumrah, who last night at Ahmedabad, Chris Martin from Coldplay, in front of 120,000 fans, called out Jasprit Bumrah and started singing a song for him, making up the words about how you torment England and you take wicket after wicket. And, of course, Bumrah just smiled it off and shrugged his shoulders. That's stardom right there.
It's a bit exotic when Australia goes to Sri Lanka. It can all be a bit booby-trapped over there. New Zealand felt the wrath of that in recent times. What might Australia's approach be? I think for a long time, after the successes in India, it was pretty clear that Head and Khawaja were going to open together, but then Constas becomes a factor as well. And that's a little insight into the thinking under Steve Smith. How creative might they be, Crash? It's going to be so interesting as to whether Smith tips his hand later today at the press conference as to what the lineup is going to be.
Yeah, Gerard, I understand that as recently as last night, they were still talking about it. Look, there's no doubt a couple of weeks ago there was a plan which involved dropping Sam Constas from the team and promoting Head to open. But that's subsequently received a bit of criticism from some very heavy voices. Now, I always believe a characteristic of this selection panel is they go their own way. They don't listen a lot to public opinion. But Ricky Ponting is one voice I do know they listen to, and he wants Constas in the team. And the two arguments that I know that have been floated over there in favour of keeping Constance, argument A, well, we've got a team of all over 30s. We've got to put one person in, and we've got the Ashes next year, and then a tour of India coming up too. So you don't want the whole batting lineup going to India, never have played in the subcontinent. And argument B, which I quite like too, is that if you drop Constance, you're only replacing him with a rookie. Like either Inglis goes in or McSweeney goes in. It's not as if Peter Handscomb's there and you're saying, subcontinental specialist, he's got to play. So I would keep Constance in the team. I hope they do for the present and the future, because he has to learn. We've seen so many players go to Sri Lanka and maybe be a bit patchy early and then learn. Damien Martin, Ponting himself. So I hope they play him, but nothing's certain. I've never seen a more open team, Gerard, than this one. Probably since the test after Sandpaper Gate when everything was going left, right and crooked. But they have a lot of decisions to make with this team.
I think there was a school of thought before they left that the top three in any order would be Head, Constance and Khawaja, and that Labuschagne would drop down the order. Smith would bat 4 and maybe Labuschagne would bat 5. So that you might have, I know you'd put forward the theory, boys have at it at the top with Head and Constance, with the security of Khawaja batting at 3, and then Smith, Labuschagne bats 5 in that scenario, and then you can let the rest roll out from there. So, yeah, I'm utterly intrigued as to what they do.
Yeah, I think too that I don't mind Head and Constance playing together because you generally get that hour in Sri Lanka where the ball's new and you can really rock them if you go hard. And I still reckon deep down, Sri Lanka have insecurity issues against Australia. If you stay close to them, Australia, Sri Lanka can crumble because they're still a little bit in awe of Australia. And that stretches right back to Shane Warne's first first breakthrough test in Sri Lanka when Alan Border threw him the ball and said, see how you go, and he won him a test. So if you start strongly against them, you can rattle them and you can roll them. So I don't mind the Constance head matchup if that's what it comes to.
The spinning pecking order when they left our shore before the incident for Kuhnemann. So it was Lyon, Kuhnemann, Murphy in that order. Would all three play? Kuhnemann's had to get through the busted thumb and the surgery that's associated with that. What's your read from afar? Will Australia play 3 specialist spinners?
I think they should. The only thing is that means dropping Scott Boland, which, I don't know, it's just one of these guys, you can make 5 reasons why you shouldn't play him over there, but you play him and he takes 3 for 40.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So there is that. But I've fancied Kuhnemann's chances ever since he gave a press conference in Brisbane last week. And I just by chance, I arrived early and he arrived early, and there was a couple of journos here, and he reached out to the journos to shake their hand with his right hand. And that's the one with the busted thumb on it. And we all sort of recall back saying, I won't touch your hand. He said, no, it's fine. The pain's gone. So he feels ready to play. There could be awkward moments of caught and bowls and that. He's got pins in the thumb, the broken thumb. It's his non-bowling hand, but they need a left armour. So then you've got Todd Murphy against Cooper Connolly. And, Murphy's had a little bit of experience in India. You would think he would be ahead in the pecking order. So one thing about Sri Lanka and India, you very rarely regret playing too many spinners.
Yeah.
I can remember covering tours over there, Gerard, and I'd grandiosely doing previews. Australia's set to play 2 spinners as if it was big news. And then guess what? By lunch on the first day, we'd be looking at each other in the press box saying, why didn't we play 3? You know what I mean? Like, what were we thinking playing a second seamer? So Mitchell Starc leads the attack. He's got this incredible record in Sri Lanka. He just bowls beautifully over there. He averages 17 per wicket. When rival teams tour Sri Lanka, they watch a video of Mitchell Starc with his left armers swinging and seaming. So he will, a lot will be expected of him, even though no one's talking about him. And he may be carrying a little niggles as a result of the summer, but he's very good in Sri Lanka. And then you've got, do you go Boland, do you go Murphy or Kuhnemann? Boland or Murphy. as your last option. Of course, in between them, Lyon will play, and I think Kuhnemann will play.
The wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock will delve further into this Test series in Sri Lanka, which you'll hear every ball of on SEN Test Cricket beginning tomorrow afternoon. Have you been to Galle, Crash?
Yeah, I have, Gerard, and I used to love the Dutch fort in the background and the Lighthouse Hotel, which was a favourite of all the players, to the point where Matthew Hayden designed his bedrooms from his house on the rooms at the Lighthouse Hotel. And on the day of the tsunami 20 years ago on Christmas Day, this extraordinary thing happened at the Lighthouse Hotel. About 4 hours before the tsunami, 2 elephants walked up to outside the foyer and roared for about 1 minute, spun on their heels and walked back into the forest and were never seen again. Oh. And the staff at the hotel still believe that was nature's way of saying there is trouble ahead. You know, you're going to be wiped out today. And it was funny, there was barely any animals killed in the tsunami. Like they all headed for the hills, and it was just these unusual stories. But the Lighthouse Hotel lived on. It was absolutely swamped. The staff left or went to one of the higher floors. But I'll never forget that story about the elephants. They knew. Humanity didn't know about the tsunami. There was no tracking system. The elephants, they reckon, knew. Amazing.
Amazing. So these tests are always a little bit exotic. I think back to 2016 where Australia got beaten 3-0 and it was really grim. Australia won the first test in 2022, the last time they toured, and then got beaten by this hodgepodge team. Sri Lanka got hit by COVID. There were players that really no one had ever heard of that came in and beat Australia by an innings. So these can be weird test matches. What sort of threat does Sri Lanka offer?
Yeah, it's a good one. Look, it'll be a wearing wicket. I'm fascinated to see whether they play 2 tests on the same deck, which makes the second test an absolute nightmare. And that really brings in a guy like Cooper Connolly, when they might just play a fleet of spinners. But they've got some really interesting players. I'm fascinated by Kaminda Mendes, who scored 5 test centuries last year, and only a few years ago, he was a spin bowler who could bowl with both arms. That's what he was famous for. Suddenly he's a batsman now who scored 5 test centuries and more than 1,000 test runs in a year at a strike rate of around 70.
Yeah.
So he's the most underrated star in the world of Test cricket at the moment. Barely any Australians have ever heard of him. You watch him go on Wednesday or tomorrow. He is a star and beautiful array of shots. So I can't wait to see him in particular. But look, Galle turns. Matai Muralitharan took more than 100 wickets there at 18. The really underrated Rangana Herath, who Kuhnemann's been watching, he's a left-armer, he took about 102 wickets, an average of 25 at Galle. He speared Australia there with his beautiful straight ball that didn't turn. But here's the thing, he had to work quite hard for his wickets there. The best spin bowling showdown of all time was at Galle when Shane Warne returned from his drug ban. He was out of the game for a year, and him and Matai Muralitharan went at each other at Galle, and they went 5 wickets to Warney, 5 wickets to Murali, 5 wickets to Warney again, and Australia won. It was just this incredible showdown of spin bowling, and Warney got Australia home. He was fresh. He'd had a year off. But you know it's going to turn, and this is fun. I love these sort of tests, Gerard. You know, you and I secretly, even though we never like to admit it, we're dodgy deck men from way back.
If it spins from the outset and Pramath Jayasuriya is opening the bowling, I'm sort of down for that.